Kermit Zone with our very special guest star, you, the listener. Yay! It's time to fetch your headphones. It's time to check the mics. It's time to chat about culture on the Kermit Zone tonight. It's time now for a shake-up. It's time to go sit tight. It's time to start recording on the Kermit Zone tonight. Why do we always come here? I guess we'll never know. It's like a kind of torture to have to tape the show. So now let's get things started.
Why don't you get things started?
It's time to get things started on the most sensational, conversational, observational, confrontational. This is what we call the Kermit Zone. Greetings, everyone. I'm Kermit the Grog. I have once again commandeered my good friend Forward Progress's little podcast for another bonus episode, which I think I want to call the Pop Culture Talk Zone, because I'm a big fan of zones, and these are a little bit more pop culture focused. So this is basically anytime we usually finish watching something, we have long conversations, and about an hour in we go, we should stop, this should go on podcast, and then we keep talking for an hour, and then one of us, whoever's place we're at, the other one finally goes home. So now I've taken to coming up with ideas, and then sitting down and turning on recording and springing them on them. So first, let's get the hellos from my other two wonderful guests, parts of this trio.
Hi, I'm Forward Progress. You know me.
Hello, I'm Nova Rose, and I'm also here.
These are beautiful introductions.
We're all present. So, and this is going to be possibly a little rough as I try to form this idea, because this is the problem, because if I told them earlier, we would just start having the conversation that would be this podcast unrecorded, which means not helpful. So, we recently finished She-Ra, and while no spoilers, it got me thinking about the way people connect to characters in shows, and especially I'm going to use the term waifu here, and I know that kind of like makes it a little like stupider to an extent, and like I've been there, we've all had waifus or abandos or whatever, maybe we haven't, I don't know what your standards levels are, but the thing that got me thinking about it was I feel like, and maybe this could be me and this whole episode will just go into the trash fire, that you can connect with characters who are kind of a little bit more on the bad side of things because either A, it's a show and you don't have to deal with them directly, or B, kind of in our case of that there is, this person can't secretly be, there's a really good chance this person can't secretly be a monster. There's no sort of like, I have to open myself to this human. It's just like, oh, this person, I like their deal, they push my buttons, and you connect with them. Even if you wouldn't, if you really thought about it, you wouldn't actually, or like, oh, usually if somebody was like this, you wouldn't be able to see, like with a show, you get to see like their kind of inner workings and the things they experience where you can't in life, where you can't kind of gain that sense. And I don't know, I was on a jog this morning and kind of was ruminating on that idea of the way people connect to characters. And especially in a waifu way, and like we had a lot of fun, you know, I guess mini spoilers. I mean, you probably piece this together from if you watch season 1 of like Catra and She-Ra's relationship, and that being like, oh, this is spicy, I love this. But like how would this actually play out in life? And not that everything has to be realistic, but it's just like we instantly just sort of like latch onto these characters, even though it's like, Catcher's kind of a jerk and an asshole a good portion of that thing. Or just like other, it's like, I mean, I don't know if I could speak for you two, but it's like, I know the character that shows up later, Double Trouble, of like, that person's really, like, in life, it's like, that person is really untrustworthy. They take shapes, like, they constantly are manipulating people, but you gravitate towards them because they're just kind of charming. I don't know. I've soliloquied enough. Is this stoking any fires? Like,
Also knows the entirety of watching She-Ra, like I feel like that person that had the two action figures going fight, 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 kiss, kiss, kiss.
I can totally picture it too.
Yes.
I have this absolute image of you doing that. If we had figures of them at home, you would have done it by now.
Speaking of, I hope there's gonna be figures of them.
I hope so too.
I would ship them.
I'm kind of in an odd boat here because I think it's been quite a long time since I've really connected with a character in that way where I've felt that waifu husbando type of thing. Because like when I was a kid, totally. I remember we had years ago like an online meetup where we played a Guess My Husbando or Guess My Waifu game.
Oh gosh, that takes me back.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, it was a long ago.
And mine was
a rumpus. Yeah.
Mine was so obvious, but
Forgot
you know,
what was it?
it was Link.
Oh yeah.
You know, because I guess I like the quiet ones, but.
Also, I am drowning in waifus. I have a problem.
Yeah, I have a feeling this is going to be more up your alley anyway, honey.
Yeah.
Because it's
As the saying goes, too many waifus will destroy your life.
Yeah, too many waifus. Lose your life loop. And this isn't like a condemnation of it of like, oh, how dare you? Because I've seen some of that online, but it's like it was like I want to take a step and think about this, and especially that whole of like, you'd go like, oh, I'd love this character, I want somebody like that, but it's that whole idea of it's just like, if you just met Katra, she would just, especially in the earlier part, like, she would just be a jerk. And you'd say, this person is toxic and no good, and you'd move on. But because, like, media is our kind of, like, little escape where we're seeing a story, where we're seeing an arc, it becomes compelling instead of something that we don't want to deal with. And it's like, how do you... It makes it interesting when you're trying to, you know, not that every story is entirely realistic, but it's pulling on real emotions of, like, I mean, She-Ra's my main example because it's what made me think about, but I've had other ones that are a little bit more extreme, but it's like, it's a show that a lot of the time is dealing with toxic relationships. But, like, again, I might be speaking myself, but I don't think, you know, we watched it together, of, like, all of the villains are just, like, you're so... I feel like they're the most interesting because you just want them to, like, figure it out and be better people.
Most of the characters on that show, especially the quote-unquote villains, are in some way, shape, or form broken people, or creatures, however you want to phrase it. That they are individuals who have been hurt, and this is where their life has led them from it. And to your point, I think there is something to, on a series, you know, looking at a character in a series, they are, like, you can watch them and kind of root for them to figure it out and get better. Like, you know, like, I want them to go, like, you know, like Katra's one where it's like, okay, she's unhealthily dealing with abandonment issues and being like, okay, when is she gonna wake up and realize this and go this? But the flip side of that is, in real life, it's you oftentimes, by sticking with that, end up harming yourself in those relationships.
Like, that was my... And talking to you guys and kind of digging into more of it, it's like, it's almost a fantasy in itself of seeing someone who is broken change for the better, as you follow along in their little, you know, their little journey that you're kind of promised by it being a story, and good stories usually involve change and character growth and all of that, that you're kind of, hey, you've probably experienced in your life somebody who you were close to that was just kind of broken, and they were a toxic human that was a drain on you, and you wanted them to improve, but they couldn't. Here's a situation where you get to see that play out. Which I never really thought about it until we started talking about it here. I'm just like, it's kind of you get to see it from behind glass happen, and it's kind of satisfying, I think.
I think there's an element of wanting to, like, always wanting to see it happen. And I think it's that thing of, like, when you see it happen, it's kind of like that idea of reigniting your faith in the world. Like, okay, people can get better. People can change. I don't have to give up on everyone. I don't have to give up on the world just because somebody, or, you know, I've run into toxic people. Because we all run into people who, you know, and I've had this discussion in the past about what makes a toxic person. I think that the reality of it is there are people who may be toxic to have you in your life at a specific time.
Yeah.
And that just happens. So, but in those situations, you have to think about what's best for you. And oftentimes, you can't stay. Or you don't know what the thing is that's going to help them out. And a real big life lesson I've learned, and I've mentioned this before, is oftentimes you have to just let people make their own mistakes.
Yes.
And fall down and grow themselves, because if you try to push it on them and force it, they won't actually learn.
Yeah.
So, sorry, go ahead.
Doesn't that essentially like describe like Adora's and Catra's like relationship throughout the entire show? Of like most of the show, it's just like they're like extremely toxic for each other, and then it's like,
well, no, they're not toxic for each other. Everybody around them is. I mean, Catra specifically.
I mean, granted, everyone around them doesn't help, but I know Catra has this whole thing like she doesn't want to deal with her issues.
Well, yeah, because like Catra's. I don't want this to just become a She-Ra podcast, but like I know it fits it here. But it's like, again, with that toxic relation, like dealing with toxic people in your life, of like, and again, mostly this is seen in season 1, so I'm a little bit more free to talk about it. But like, Catra is just at the end of a long line of toxic people being mean to other people, making that like it's this awful trickle down, which I feel like you could see that in life of, you know, somebody who grows up with a rough home life kind of turns into a rough, broken person themselves, and then that, if they have a family, just propagates down or out of themselves to others, into whatever relationships they find themselves in. Not always, but in this situation where we're seeing it kind of turn out poorly, it's just, you know, you have Hordak at the top. Technically, you've got another one above him, but I'm not going to talk about. But it's like, it all just, you know, Hordak gets dunked on, Hordak dunks on Shadow Weaver dunks on Catra dunks on her underlings, and it's just this chain of toxicity where it's like, if somebody could just, like, and we see that then later, if somebody can just break those links.
Well, and there's even more layers to that, especially when you want to talk about a character like Shadow Weaver, because
Yes.
They have their own issues that were existing before the Horde
Yes.
that came in. So the Horde just feeds upon what already began, and the negativity that built up from feeling misunderstood and you know, and I think abandonment is kind of one of the biggest, if not the biggest, one of the biggest themes of the entire series. And it's a theme that I think all of us at some point in life have felt some form of abandonment, whether or not it's real or justified. If you feel it within yourself, which makes it real.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I feel like just like the idea of toxic people is challenging for the main reason of like, between like Shadow Weaver was a god awful mother, but like it's interesting kind of like seeing her change and like kind of come to terms with that and like start to kind of do good, but then it's like by that time like everyone's just completely lost faith in her,
And also she doesn't really know how to, like, even when she's technically gone back and like doesn't really do anything seemingly that untrustworthy, she's like, just how she speaks is constantly just like untrustworthy, and you always doubt her. Just the way she is always like suspicious, even though it's just, I don't think it's always necessarily it's what her intentional is.
So I guess kind of more my point is like, you know, like if you have that toxic person, then like eventually they are like, hey, like I've been a crappy toxic person and like I want to start doing better, but then there's that stigma towards them that almost makes it difficult for them to actually change, because like you have everyone else saying, no, you're a horrible toxic person, when they're like, but I want to do good finally.
Do you want to segue into at least another property to try to get another example?
I mean, I have a concept switch unless you've got something else.
Well, yeah, my
Not a
only,
switch, but of a
Yeah.
rotation.
Not in the same way as what we see in She-Ra, but obviously, the one of the ones that came to my mind was Sunset Shimmer. Because you have in the first Equestria Girls movie that she is the toxic person.
Almost kills people.
You're like, well, but even before the end, the climax, like she set herself up by being horrible to people and setting that all up. And then, like what you were just saying about Rose, is then you get into Rainbow Rocks where nobody trusts her and nobody knows how to do it, even though she's making the effort. And it takes until Friendship Games before she can really be that, you know, like fully grasp who she is and have everybody else grasp that too. And I think that's a thing. And maybe, and I would, you know, you could argue that there should be some period because, you know, like, it's not like, you know, our emotions are real and, you know, getting hurt matters.
Yes.
So, you know, it's natural to need to take some time and for people to need to prove themselves that they are really making the effort to become better. You know,
you can't just say it.
Right. And I think it's good to have the open mind that people can change, but there's that fine line between having the open mind and accepting people and letting yourself just get hurt over and over and over again. And it's sometimes very hard to walk. And I think we've all had this with people, even in our own personal lives.
Yes.
And it's, you know, there's no real right or wrong answer. I think the bottom line is at the end of the day, for me anyway, it's like, don't give up on humanity just because somebody's done you wrong. And they may be able to change. And, you know, don't ever completely rule out somebody, but they have to, like, they do at the same token have to show you that they are making amends. They are making the effort and they are trying. And a lot of times sometimes it's just simple conversations and being like, you know, like recognizing what you do, even as you're like, when you slip up and you know, it's all about baby steps and becoming better.
I think, like, I mean, just going to my own personal life, like, I know, like, I've always had a really complicated relationship with my dad, mainly because, like, there was so many instances where, like, oh, I think he's finally going to get himself together, and, like, things, like, will finally start having a healthy relationship, and then it falls apart. But I know, like, recently, like, instead of just being, like, I'm sorry, like, I did this, and like, and just talking about it, like, I'm actually seeing, like, genuine change in, like, with his actions instead of just his words. It's like, talk is cheap.
Correct. I'm someone who very much agrees with that.
Yeah. Now, granted, I mean, conversation and discussion is important. It's just a matter of, I think the thing is, it's like, there's not always an instance where somebody can go and make some grand gesture to prove themselves, like we see often in media, where it's like the movie where they sacrifice themselves in the big scene, or they, you know, they do that big show. We're not going to always have that in life, and that's where things get trickier, because life isn't a movie.
I guess I want to roll with that a little bit into my little, like, turning of things of this other side of the coin, is that we see a lot of media. She-Ra to an extent, Steven's really big on it, anime does it a lot. I know Naruto's is like where I have the dumb shorthand of talk no jutsu, where it's like, instead of, we're going to fight the enemy, but at the end of the day, we're going to talk to them, and they're going to see the error of the ways from communication. And I feel like that's a good lesson to teach, but it's like, what media teaches of, like, you're not going to be able to solve every toxic human problem and stick, like, you already said it, and we've all experienced it in life. You can't stick around every kind of broken human that is toxic, because it's not good for you. And I feel like I don't know if that's presented in media enough. That was one of my favorite, like, that was one of the reasons, as, like, tragic as a lot of that story is, like, Jasper and Steven in Steven Universe, is that she is someone who's, like, again, talk is cheap, and, like, that doesn't work on her. Like, you can come upon somebody who's kind of on that path, who's kind of, I mean, we're all kind of broken in different ways, but is that kind of toxic human that doesn't, maybe not even knowing. It's like, you're kind of saying it, like, your life isn't a TV show. You might not even be, you know, anywhere near the quote unquote last person it takes to finally push them over to make a change, if that even ever happens. And you can't take it on your own shoulders. There's a responsibility that needs to be you. And I feel like I don't, and again, this is off the top of my noggin, and my memory is very malleable at times, but like, I don't see that as a theme explored a lot. The theme I see explored a lot now is, which I think is good, is talk to people. Violence isn't the only solution. You know, and a lot of these more action-focused things. And I think that's fantastic. I really appreciate that. But I think there's other stories to tell in other places of you don't have to put yourself through this grinder. It's not your responsibility. Don't think that you are the one that can make the difference. Because sometimes it's not that time yet, and it's not going to be you. And it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you or wanting to help. Sometimes you just have to remove people.
Well, let's say you can reach out the olive branch, but if they don't take it, then they didn't take it.
I mean, there's also, vaguely pulling from my own personal experience and kind of cribbing from Rose's notes of like, you can bring up the troubles to somebody and they can say they will improve, but you're still in the toxic bath on that gamble if they get better or not.
Yeah, well, and I think that's the thing. It's like you can put it out there, but then they have to come at you with it and show you it. It's and I think you're right. I'm having difficulty thinking of a lot right now. Granted, this is the end of a work week for me, so my brain's a tad fried.
We're all in quarantine, so we've all got mush brains.
But so I'm sure there are things. It's interesting right now because Rose and I just started watching Kipo and the Age of Wonder Beasts. Mm-hmm. And there's some of the main characters in there. There's a lot of back and forth with some of the main characters about whether or not whether they should be fighting their way through, essentially, or just like trying to just kind of spearhead their way through on their journey, or whether they should be talking to and communicating with and befriending creatures as they go. And it's I'm interested. I've only gotten to like episode 5 or so there's still a lot more I have to go. But it's interesting because it's like there are people who have big hearts. Bringing back to She-Ra, Perfuma would be one case there where I would say about this, where she's like my strength is my big heart and that I can believe in people. But I think the big thing there was that the person, especially the reference I'm making, and I know you both know what I'm talking about, is that person had already proved themselves before. Mm. So it's because we've had things where, I've had things, like even you and I have had times where I think, like, our hairs got crossed and we kind of like were just, we were apart for a while, and then it took a while, but we came back, and even when we came back together and just talked, like, it was kind of a slow piece together there, which is, I think, was good because it let us kind of slowly develop, like, we
both had our guards up a little bit.
Yeah, but it's like
kind of ease back in.
Yeah, but I think having gone through that period makes everything that much stronger now, because we kind of got to, over time, see a little bit of each other's side of what we were going through and all that. So it's tough, and you're not always going to know what the right call to make is, and that's a thing. It's like, I'd love to sit here and be like, here's identifying factors and this, that, and the other thing.
Yeah.
But each situation's unique, and there are some pieces of media out there that can be helpful guides. It's Jasper's an interesting one that you mentioned. Where my mind was starting to go partially was kind of how you had, my mind keeps going back to Pony, but
that's where your mind is. That's your bread and butter.
So, you had Starlight Glimmer in season 5, where Twilight literally reaches out her hoof, and Starlight takes it, and it's like, okay, I will accept this. I will try to be better. Exactly one season later, she tries to do the same thing to Chrysalis, and Chrysalis basically is like, hell no, I will get revenge on you. But that's the thing. It's like, one offer was made, an offer was made, it was shunned, it was pushed away, and, you know, and therefore it was very much that no, you know, like, it's, the offer was at least made, but that was a character who could not be redeemed, would not be redeemed, which I think was good in the end. There are those instances where you can't redeem everybody. Not everybody will let themselves be it. And I think that's kind of where I'm getting with this is an individual has to want to make themselves better. You cannot make somebody change who they are, what they want. You can try to provide evidence, influence, but at the end of the day, it's up to them to make that big call and that big decision.
I think that's a really good point. And also, you were an incredible podcaster because Rose and I were trying to catch a spider while you were monologuing this incredible monologue. And I want to give forward, like, mega props for that. Because, yeah, he was making a really good point of things being redeemable, of willingness to change. And I don't know if people always either are willing to change or even think they need to change. And that's the extra little, like, piece I was thinking about as he was talking about that and all this, and especially with media, is where it's not just where you don't treat it as just like good, bad, or like toxic, not toxic, but like differences in ideologies. Then we'll up the ante. Then where it's like something big comes to mind. Rose, you'll know this. Jer, I don't think you got far enough to meet this character, and it's been a little while, so my exacts are a little rusty. But Stain from My Hero Academia, where it's not just the I'm evil, I'm committing crimes. There's like an ideological difference, and it's not just a battle of good or evil, of don't be a jerk, be a hero. It's in his eyes, he's being a hero. He sees the current hero situation as like corrupt, and this is his murders are a way of fixing that, of weeding it down to the true heroes. And it's like in those types of things where it's like, and again, we're also talking about an anime that is presenting an idea that everybody has superpowers, and it's a shonen anime, so combat is just sort of a language spoken in the show. But I think that's where things get even more complicated. And you could take that idea to smaller to just humans, where it doesn't have to involve the murder of people, but people have ideological differences that they can think they're in the right, that they don't. I mean, I think everybody, you don't always notice if you're the toxic one, that you're the problem.
There's
and it also does not help that a lot of the time of experience that I've had and stories that I've heard is that usually someone who is toxic and doesn't notice it is usually blaming everyone else.
Oh yeah. And I think that's a challenge that I try to consistently send out to everybody is, like, let me put it this way. You know, I've been doing conventions and presentations and such for like, I don't know, like 6-7 years now, something like that. And I've presented a lot. I've seen a lot. When I go to a convention, I don't just go just to present. I love watching other presentations that strike my interest. But I've come across this at times where there will be presenters who have a topic that's fascinating, where it's like something where it's a real problem. But then the panel or the presentation ends up being an hour of people just agreeing that this is a problem and it needs to change. As opposed to
I've been to those.
How do we change it?
I
actually think you and I have attended one or two of them together. So
very possible.
And I don't see them very often, but I think this is a trap we all get into, is instead of really tackling the root issues a lot of the time, we recognize there's a problem, we see it, and
we even recognize symptoms, but it's like...
Well, like, here's the thing, and I think that this is a very big point I want to make. A lot of times, I think we get this feeling about, like, why should I have to be the one to fix the rest of the world? Because it's not my responsibility. It's not my fault that they're jerks or they're assholes. And the really sad reality of the world is the onus often falls on the disenfranchised to make the change in the world and make people stand up. Because if nobody makes them stand up, they never will change. So
That's it. Okay. When you were saying that, I don't know. This might be our difference in ideology, but of like my view that I've always internalized of making change in the world is that change starts with me. That change starts with individually within
absolutely.
all of us.
Yeah, I think we're probably on the same wavelength. Maybe just kind
Different
of
verbiage about it. Maybe
there's one thing that I've learned through studying social science, social psychology about. You have to give somebody a reason to want to change, and that's very hard.
Yes.
And there's little things you can do, and one of the very core tenets to just people in general is we have a habit to want to stick to the status quo because it's safe, it's what we know. It keeps your self-esteem where it is in check. You don't have to run wild risks because your brain is trying to keep you safe. Well, if the norm is wrong, my challenge has always been make a new norm. And it's oftentimes really difficult to do that on a grand scale and then there's that thing where you think about like how can I as one little person make the whole world change type of thing. And then that gets really intimidating. And I think for me the reality that I had to come to eventually is I may not be able to change the world, but if I can live my life in a certain way and influence my little group, that there's this norm of this is the way things are, and at least put that out there, then it's that idea of like the more people who have that as their norm, the more that spreads out and becomes a bigger norm overall.
And they'll tell two friends, and they'll tell two friends, and so on, and so on, and so on.
You know, and it sounds so silly, but there's actual scientific evidence to that very thing.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, it's, I think it's called a rule of, I don't want to say a rule of three. There's essentially, like, it goes, spreads out for, like, 3 circles. So, like, let's say I say something or do something, and I affect 6 people. Those 6 people, like, out of those 6 people, then they will each influence 1 or 2, and then it's that thing.
It's a ripple
It
effect.
usually goes about 3 layers out.
That's neat. It's a cool way to think about it. Okay. So I was still ruminating of like where we started and kind of putting this on, and you saying specifically of like people's brains want to protect themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And to take that and where we've been going, which is super interesting, and kind of taking it back to our initial topic of the whole like waifu thing and like how we gain these connections to these characters even though they're kind of in life toxic. I think also like a show gives you just a head-on, here is this person acting as they are, even though you're just meeting them. Here's them in their natural habitat, acting as they're acting. You get to see all of you get to see their ups and their downs. You get to follow their story in like a linear fashion. And also you're watching this from behind, I mean, metaphorical and some, not literal, because I don't think we watch things behind plexiglass, but like you're watching it from literally behind a wall. Or like I guess another angle I could attack this from is like a dating sim, because like I even had that like a little bit with something I was messing around with. It's just like, because people are just acting in these kind of program ways that you're kind of seeing their ups and their downs and the ways their brains tick, you kind of build these connections a lot quicker. And also because you can't be hurt by it because it's not real. But I think there's something to that of being able to experience somebody just as they are, like right out of the gate, in this way that it doesn't feel like you can get hurt.
There's like,
and it'd be interesting if there was a way you could do that in life. And I'm literally just getting this thought now, so like I am like extra freewheeling right now and popping off the top of the dome. But like I think that's why, is that you can experience these characters who are, I mean, like everyone in the world is a character. They have a story, they have whatever they've gone through, they've had their ups and downs, but you don't get to see that, which is 1,000,000,000% reasonable. But I feel like that's where you connect with people. But like everybody has their guard up because the world's a scary place. So it's like, how do you...
Well, that almost...
How do you... We're like rapidly swapping into like real life from pop culture, but it's like that... It's that space of like, we find it so easy to connect to characters because we don't have any... We can't get that much backsplash from it. Mm-hmm. We can't get that hurt. Actually, I have a really good segue, actually, that kind of gets a little wavy. But, Rose, did you want to say... You're making faces like you might want to say something, but I don't know if you're just, like, futzing around in your seat.
No, it's kind of a matter of just trying to...
Process?
Process.
Okay, I can dig it.
The one thing I'll throw out is kind of that kind of, I guess, a counter question. In that sense of, okay, so there's that kind of that thing about, there's that old adage about like, I shouldn't say an old adage, but it's a question I've heard brought up, and I've had this discussion before with people of you can learn why somebody's a terrible person, but does that give them the excuse of being a terrible person?
Oh, I feel like certain media things use that idea in the wrong way of, here's the villain, here's why they're the way that they are, and that absolves them of why they're committing evil. And it's not a thing that absolves them. It is a reason why you can pity them.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and also have scorn for them.
I think one of the best series I've ever seen to deal with this topic, and Rose will be with me on this, is Bojack Horseman.
Yeah.
Because you see a character who is endearing yet terrible. He's like, you don't have to say it. Like, you don't even have to, like, you watch it and you're like, this guy is just like, he's not good.
Yep.
No. He does bad things, like, but he is trying in there. But he has so many mental demons he can't get over it. And over the course of the series, he makes little steps, but then he falls back, and you see this like climb over and over, and this constant struggle, which is so what life is about. But you also see what stuff about what his childhood was like, how terrible his parents were, and you even get to see how terrible his grandparents were to his mother.
You get to see the entire...
Like, you get to see how it all went.
Column.
But it's kind of I don't think it ever presented it in such a way where you looked at it as an excuse. And at the end of the series, he kind of has to own up for himself and take responsibility for himself. And I think that was the biggest takeaway at the end of it is we can look at the world and be like, my life is messed up because of the world. And it's really easy to do. And it's not saying that the world didn't hurt you and the world didn't cause you pain to bring you to where you are now. But if you spend your entire life looking out, you'll never grow with it.
Kind of staying in the realm of Bojack is, I think, like, especially like when you want to try to redeem yourself or try to make yourself a better person, I think the biggest or one of the most important things is intent. Where with Bojack, I feel like he wanted to do better, but it was always for the wrong reasons. It was either to do better to go, like, improve his image, or to go, like, improve his standing with his friends. And it's just like, it was never about improving himself because he just wanted to be a better person. It was never about that.
I think the thing is that we see this in season 1 of Bojack with Todd and the rock opera. Mm-hmm. And I've presented on this, actually, that I likened, so I can reference something that you're familiar with here.
Thank you.
I likened it, what Bojack does in that episode, to what Twilight Sparkle does in Lesson 0. Mm-hmm. In that I need, my anxiety over something here and what might happen is going to cause me to lash out at people. And that's exactly what happens here is he's genuinely helping somebody. he's doing something and it doesn't even start necessarily that way, but then he actually gets really into helping somebody. And then he sees by helping someone, they might move on to greater and bigger things. And the fear of him leaving him behind, being left behind, causes him to sabotage the whole thing he just built up. So this is like, this happens. And I think that's the hardest thing we all have to look internally about to make sure we're not doing is, are we oftentimes are we being our own biggest self-saboteurs? Because I can tell you, I've done plenty of self-sabotage, whether it's conscious or subconscious, but I know I've done it. It's definitely been a thing. Yeah.
There's not really a manual on how to be.
How to life. It's not written. Many people have tried to. There's some great books and memoirs out there, but everybody's unique.
I feel like Bojack is actually a good example, because I had a weird specific example that, thinking on it more, I could actually extend out to something you guys could relate to a little bit more. But I feel like I was going to be like characters can't, from shows and media, can't at the end of the day really hurt you, like I described it. There's that screen between you that they're not real. And I feel like Bojack kind of gets at it more, of that constant that consternation. And the thing that kind of hit me, where I was like, they can't hurt you, and then I thought of a very recent and now personal example to me, that you guys won't be able to get on, but I'll be able to follow it up with one that'll connect more, is the world of pro wrestling. And I guess this could extend to actors, but I feel like this specific situation fits more in wrestling, and the thing I'm going to extend to, but I want to kind of build my base first, of you are rooting for a person who is playing a character, but in most cases is usually also this person. The part of what makes kind of pro wrestling what it is the line between performer and the actor is kind of wibbly wobbly. So, you're seeing what their character is doing on a show, in the way that you would watch any other show that you would see. I mean, we usually talk about animation, but that you could see in a live action show or whatever, that, it's a character being portrayed by an actor in an animated show. But then there is the person who is also that is connected, not quite the same, and that person can turn out to be awful, which is what me and the wrestling community is dealing with right now. There's been a massive Me Too movement going on called Speaking Out, where a lot of really heinous behavior has come out about a lot of people, and there's something about somebody you maybe not idealize, but when you go that's somebody I watch on a show, and that they can, again, you're separated by that screen. And normally when it's an actor, it's it kind of hurts, but it's not as much. But where that sort of that line is wobbly and kind of wiggly, and you're not quite sure where one ends and one begins, it hurts so much more, because you've connected to an actual person's pursuit, but is wrapped up in media. So you're kind of behind this wall, but it's all real, and it just creates this really dangerous morass. And where I can connect that back to you guys, that it made me think of something similar that I know I've experienced, and I'm guessing you guys have possibly too, is YouTubers and social media people, because they're playing themselves, but they're kind of playing a character of themselves. And when things, and again, you're experiencing them, that there is a wall on a screen, but there's also, what I was saying before, of the whole, when you create relationships, they're a real person that you can meet and form relationships with, like any other human. And those things start melding together, but that when that person has the possibility to turn out to just be an awful monster in life, where you don't have, you're viewing them as somebody who's safely behind glass, you're watching their videos, but they can freaking stab through that screen because they're an actual human that can screw up and be awful and hurt you and disappoint you and, make you kind of lose that faith in things. And just that odd, I wish I would have watched it. The bunch of other YouTubers I follow have been talking about, and I've been seeing places, and Jerry, you might actually know this, is the idea of, and all I really have is the name and the vague concept, so I'm really hoping you have this in your brain, is parasocial relationships. Okay, we both need to watch this video afterward. But I've been seeing it more and more with, YouTubers and influencer people of people, and I'm totally guessing at it, so this might be flying from seat of my pants gut, and I could be super wrong, but my understanding of it, just out of context clues, is it's like, there is people you follow online that you feel like you have a relationship with. Even if you know that actively you don't in your brain. But you still feel like you know this person. You have spent hours of your time, like, listening to them speak and then talking about personal things. I know all of us watch a lot with, like, Game Grumps. Mm-hmm. It's like, I feel, or like, I'm going to speak for me because I can't speak for you guys because I'm not you and I don't want to put words in your mouth. It's like, I feel connected to Aaron and Danny, Mm-hmm. And if they turn out to be awful, it's like, that hurts in the way that, like, a friend is awful. They're kind of playing characters when they're on camera. They're not their actual selves, but they're, like, a part of them is.
Although, it's one thing that is nice, though, is, like, when, even though that they kind of screw up, but then, like, actually, like, kind of realize that they screwed up, and then, like, kind of making steps to becoming better.
I'm talking a step more than screwing up. Like, I guess to the wrestling thing of, like, when it's like, oh, this person's a monster. This person, like sexual misconduct and like, rape and assault and just, like, and that being hidden and going, like, oh, I didn't know this about this person. I thought they were an upright, respectable human being, and it turns out they were a monster and a big problem. And, like, that hurts.
So, like, the Pro Jared situation.
Yes. I don't know that situation 100%, but it's like
there
was a lot of
stuff.
Really messed up stuff going on for this person.
It was one of those things where I think this is one of those interesting moments where there was a lot of messed up things going on, but there was more to the story that people thought. And it didn't necessarily absolve him, but it was like both sides have dirtied their hands.
And that often happens. And that's a thing, and I think that's but I get where you're going with this, and that's a hard thing.
Just to make sure, please remember your words, Jerk, because I want to hear you talk, but I just want to kind of, like, crystallize more of this concept of just, we're talking about relationships that are normally, that you can connect more because you are defended by a screen, but that, like, She-Ra can't screw up. She-Ra can't be that awful, because that's not what the story is. But human beings can. Well, but what if you're watching them as in the same way that you would watch She-Ra behind your screen, that you are distant from it, but they can still screw up like an actual human being and betray your trust.
But then, like, what about, like, if, say, like, the director of the show or, like, the voice actress screws up?
See, okay, so I'll
see. Yeah, now you're getting in there.
I've got two different things with this here. One, I'll just parlay on what you had. So a good friend of ours hosts movie nights online through the pandemic, and they put up polls of what to watch. And tonight's poll had 2 Woody Allen movies to choose from. And I it's kind of one of the need I say more, because it's kind of was like
we were going to talk about watching Ants, admittedly. I guess he's just in it. I'm sorry. Continue.
He's the main character.
But it's again. That's a thing where, like, there were people out there that, this is a question I asked myself earlier tonight, and I don't want to get too much into it because we'll be here all night, but it's like there is that thing where one person screws something up, but especially in a production like film and television, there's so many pieces to the machine that builds that. So it's like a good actually, you know what a fantastic example of this is when they brought Roseanne back, and it was really good, very timely, and then Roseanne said something really
awful
stupid
stuff that was not needed or funny,
right? And the entire show got canceled. So one person's mistake, boom, all these people were going to lose their jobs. all this stuff. And it's one of those things of, like, looking back on things and going, like, and I don't have the answer for this, and I only want to go so far into this, this was just kind of like a thought experiment to throw out there for everybody to think about. At what point is consuming it giving, like, saying that what they did was okay? And at what point are you celebrating the rest of the people in it and the other art, that's there? It's things like looking at Kevin Spacey movies.
This is.
Oh yeah, no.
This is an entire other podcast we can record another time because I have so much more freaking stuff to process through with all this wrestling stuff.
That's only one.
We'll save that one. Put a pin in that one. Oh my gosh, yes, that needs to be an episode.
So the other thing too was to the point you guys were bringing up about what you said, where She-Ra can't be terrible. Well, even in She-Ra, one of the main protagonists gets pretty terrible there for a while. And, and I remember watching it where you would turn to me, Rose, and go, they're the worst. And it was an interesting thing, because they were doing the wrong thing, but they had the right intentions. And then again, that leads into that conversation we had about villains earlier.
But I'm, like, the thing I'm saying of, like, they're not a monster. It doesn't secretly turn up of, like, oh, this character is a child molester, or like this person kills on the side.
Well, said individual could have destroyed the world / universe.
Correct.
And maybe not even intended, but
I'm missing the connection to my own brain because it's a lot bigger. It's not as round as the thing I'm talking about, but exactly. in the course of that show, that makes more sense.
So yeah, I'm just trying to pull it back into media.
Certainly.
It's very hard. It's very tough, and there are things that are case study movies or quote unquote case study films where, like, even your main character is horrible. Yep. And sometimes those are the hardest things to watch.
Yep. That's why I couldn't keep watching Sopranos after a certain point and Breaking Bad. Mm-hmm. Because it was just like, I can't deal with these terrible people being even more terrible than before.
But then, but I know, Rose freaking loves Breaking Bad.
A lot of people did. My family loved it. I hopped off the wagon because I personally couldn't handle it anymore.
For me, I think that was Game of Thrones. I made it through a few seasons with Rose, and I remember she was like, well, who are you rooting for? And I'm like, no one.
I mean, that's what I would say with other things. It's,
I genuinely wanted all of the main characters to die by the end of the series to make it worthwhile. It sounds horrible, but
kind of awful. But it's like, I don't know, I guess bridging from that idea, unless that's going into a completely new direction of just like, you need something you can hold on to and root for. At least I feel like that.
I think that's what brings us into media, because at the end of the day, a lot of times it is kind of like, a lot of times we attach to things because it is an escape from reality.
Yeah.
To an extent. But we also try to put ourselves into it and connect to characters. So it's kind of like, there is a lot of self-insertion that happens with the various properties and such, and yes.
So, kind of going back to what we were talking about at the very start of this podcast of, like, we talk about characters, like Walter White being like, how are you going to connect with this character, and, like, kind of, like, losing interest in it because everyone's so terrible. But then what about the waifu? Where, like...
What about the waifu? Here's... Walter Waifu.
Oh, no.
Fan art on my... No, please don't.
No, it already exists. I'm going to pull out my phone.
No!
Continue. Ignore me.
My point being is, like, I think of characters like, say, like, Gasai, who's, like, basically, like, if you think of, the yandere meme, where it's just like, she's front and center. But then it's like, she's this horrible psychopathic killer, yet people, like, she's waifu for some people, and it's like, how?
Well, I think there can be that element too of, if they're not real, you can kind of talk off some of the horrible points.
Oh, yeah.
Sure, but I mean, Walter White isn't real, but it's like...
He's not...
But he's not a waifu.
He's not hot.
But I
like,
also...
I say that half jokingly, but like, he's not presented as somebody who is...
Although Bryan Cranston is an amazing human.
Oh,
can we all agree on that?
Yes. Agree on that in an instant.
Yeah, I think...
But yeah, like, I think it's just because he is not presented as that, where that is, and this is well outside the scope of this, but, like, kind of like what Jared said, is, like, this is a fantasy realm, you can cut around this and go, well, this is just fantasy, and just take it as a concept or whatever, and, like, flow with it, like... I don't know if you've noticed, and also we're part of this, this is one of the things that prompted this conversation, but, like, the internet is an exceptionally thirsty place, and they will drink whatever is on hand as much as they want, even if it's like turpentine, because they like the way the buzz goes down their throat, metaphorically speaking. Without getting in literally any detail of like my own freaking proclivities of like, I can find, we're gonna say, interest in things that if they actually happened would be awful, and I would hate them and be disgusted by it. But because I get to do my little, like, I'm on the internet, again, this isn't real, so I get that little sense of fantasy and distance, I get to cut around it in just the exact laser pinpoint way that I want for the things that I want from it. And I feel like that's kind of I feel like that is now the extreme we find ourselves in with waifus. And again, I'm not calling it out. This whole episode, which we need to start winding down because we're almost at an hour, which...
Not surprising for us.
We're doing pretty good. I feel like we talked a bunch, which is good. But like, this is about... I mean, it was me trying to pass on from me to you guys of how I was doing, of just like, think about that. Like, the next time you start connecting to a character, you go, why am I kicking this character? You go, oh, I love this character, look at the fan art, I love it, whatever, they're my waifu. Just take an extra second and just kind of think about it. Not as a means of like discouragement, but just sort of as like an understanding about yourself and how you interact with others. I don't know. I thought that was interesting. I feel like, we've watched She-Ra and I've made such connections to the characters, both good and bad, where it's like, I feel like in life we have a lot harder time of it. And that's that was the sort of ending mission statement of my idea with this little episode, was that it's like, what makes it so easy, and trying to explore what makes it so easy for us to connect with characters in media, but we have such a harder time with in life. And I feel like, I'm hoping at least we've explored some of those reasonings here. And with my mission statement instead, final statement. The ball is yours, the floor is yours, and the mic is yours. I mean, the mic's technically mine. This is my mic. Please don't take it. It's my only good microphone. But metaphorically speaking, the floor is yours.
You go.
I feel like I could literally probably talk like at least an hour about why I love the dynamic of Adora and Catra and their back and forth throughout the series. Like, I can go on about that.
Oh.
Like, between, like, seeing, like, a lot of myself in Catra and just, like, her motivations, like, I completely understand her struggle.
You know what's funny? You know which ones, some of the ones that got to me a little bit more was Scorpia and Catra.
Oh, because that one's
platonic
for a long while.
Well, and that one hit home. And I think that's the thing for me, because when I was younger, especially, like as a kid, I had a lot of those where I had quote unquote friends who really, at the end of the day, just weren't good friends and weren't good to me and really weren't real friends.
Are you saying you give great hugs?
I think I give great hugs.
You're true. Yeah, this is.
I don't have pincers though, so.
Even better.
I might sting you though. That came out sounding freaky, and it didn't mean to.
Let's edit that one out. By which I mean make it louder and reverberate multiple times.
I'm the Scorpio here.
That was supposed to be.
No, but I guess it's That's a good point. Is I feel like because part of a character in a story is to display what's troubling them. We just get to see that and possibly resonate with it. We get a literal buffet of like, hey, if this particular relationship trouble doesn't resonate with you, maybe this one will or this one will. You get especially because it's again what I've had this on the back burner in my head for a while, and this kind of brought it back. You get this buffet of one of these dynamics will resonate with you.
Oh yeah, no, there's so
and in
many
life you don't get this freaking like try or platter. You just happen upon people, and everything's so like messy. And I feel like anytime I feel like thinking on that is anytime anybody ever tells you media should be more realistic, you need to tell them to shove it and talk about this.
Because like even in fantasy realms you can find things to apply to your own life, and I think that's the big thing is we all consume media, and we all, I think at one point or another have been like, if only our world was like this. And
well, we already know that we don't want the world to be Pokemon.
we'd all be dead.
At this point, I am down for whatever else than 2020. I don't care.
Me and Jer have presented multiple panels about why that's a bad
idea. I
idea.
know. If it was any other time, it's not like, oh boy, Pokemon. It's just, Truddy's been a trip. I'll take any alternative
I feel like 2020 has been Flowey's world.
I will take the devil's deal to get out of 2020.
Because we're bringing up 2020, I
guess. We don't have time to
change
topics.
No. This is my final thought.
Okay, I'm sorry.
And it's fitting because the world is kind of a hot mess right now.
Yes.
And
putting it mildly,
I think everything we talked about kind of goes along with this, is that right now we're all looking to make sense of the world and looking to find how we belong and fit in this crazy whatever is happening. And I really just think that this is the time right now. Now there's ripples, there's things out there, and if you want to stand up and be yourself and promote positivity and say that you want to grow with the world together, this is the time to do it. There's never been a better time, because out of the ashes rises a phoenix.
All I can say is rip and tear them all with love.
Gosh, I sure hope so. And here we are, right at the hour mark. Thank you for stopping on by. I hope this makes you look at your media and or waifu consumption a little bit differently, because that's what it's about. This isn't a yay or a nay at anything. This isn't something is good or bad. It's just I think we all need to take a little time and like think about things a little bit more, because I'm really bad at that, and I have a feeling other people are probably too, and I feel like that'll help us gain a better understanding of anything. So this is Kermit the Grog signing off.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Good night.